St. Irenaeus has this fascinating line where he says, the glory of God is man fully alive. And for years, I'm like, really? That's the glory of God? What's that all about? Why do people coming alive express the glory of God? Find out as you hang with us here. Welcome back, everybody. John and Alan in the studio here. Beautiful, beautiful day outside. Oh my gosh, it's just so nice to have great weather.
So nice to see the sun.
Soaking in the sun.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. We are going to talk about coming alive. What does it mean? Why is Christ so committed to that? How is that so central to the purposes of God? And then we're going to take this in a surprising angle today, surprising direction. But before we do, two things. First, I want to say thank you, everybody, for helping to support us through the summer months. Your gifts, your support, that's how we operate. We are a nonprofit. We are crowdfunded, meaning it's you, our friends, who are helping us get this mission all over the world and set hearts free. And so if you could help, we are so grateful for it. You can give online, wild@heart.org. You can give on the app, super easy now on the new platform. So yeah, thanks everybody. Second thing, let's take our pause. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, my hunch is it'd be really good to catch your breath, let the chaos go. I know I need to, so let's do that together. So Father, Jesus, Holy Spirit, thank you for your love. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you that you are present with me right now, right here. And I need to draw upon your life today. And so I'm going to lay down everything right now. I'm going to lay down everything to just come back to you and to myself. I give everyone and everything to you. Take a few moments and name what you need to release and just turn it over to God. Breathe your life into me now. Breathe the breath of God into my heart, soul, mind, and strength. Breathe your breath into me and meet us here this week in the podcast. Speak, God. Amen. Okay. So one of the most fascinating things, I started with that St. Irenaeus quote about the glory of God.
Yes.
Is humanity, it's his sons and daughters coming fully alive. And that sounds so pop psychology. I mean, that's like Oprah, right? That's Dr. Phil stuff, like Deepak Chopra. I'm like, really? That's one of the great church fathers? And what's that all about?
Yeah.
So, fascinating story. As a young therapist, I noticed this phenomenon begin to happen, and I didn't have an explanation for it. I'd be working with clients of all ages, from teens to people in, deep into retirement. Various conditions, various things, depression, marriage issues, anxiety disorders, a whole variety of stuff. Alan, it was fascinating to me was that as my clients began to get better, there was a flourishing, there was an awakening, there was a light in their eyes, right? And a bounce in their step. And they began to do the funniest things. Like I had a 68-year-old accountant client who started taking dance lessons.
I love it.
And young people who I check in on them and they're like, yes, I'm learning French because I want to speak French. I started watching this, watercolors. I'm doing a pottery class.
Yeah.
And at the time, as a young therapist, I didn't know what was happening. Are you tracking with
I'm
me?
tracking totally.
Yeah. What was happening?
Well, their hearts were, I think, awakening to more of who God created them to be as they had freedom through the counseling and as they discovered some of their own story, right?
Yep.
And from that, it was like what had been clogged up or like a waterway that was closed off, dammed shut, dam, it was opened.
Yes.
And I think that rush of living water can't help but cause us to start dreaming again and start creating again. And that's a beautiful thing to see in people that have been shut down in all areas of their life. And when that starts to open, the creative part of who we were created to be opens up, right?
Well, it's just fascinating. And I love it that you used the phrase as the water came through, because there's that marvelous vision that Ezekiel, a mystic, I want to add, one of the Old Testament mystics, he has a vision. God takes him to the temple and he sees the river of life flowing out from the temple of God.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating, because he wasn't in Jerusalem. He was exiled in Babylon. So he's having a full kingdom encounter going on, because he's back in Jerusalem, or at least he's seeing it. And he sees this river coming out from the temple of God. Yeah. And then he gets like a guided tour as the narrative goes on. He took me out to where it was ankle deep, and he took me out to where it was knee deep. It's flowing out into the countryside.
Right.
Okay. Take me out to where it was waist deep. And then he took me out to where it was so deep, no one could even swim across this. So this becomes this massive, river of life.
Yes.
And then the line is this: at the end of the narrative, he says it twice. He says, his guide says, so it might be Jesus, not sure who it is, might be an angel, says to him, wherever this water flows, everything will live. And he looks and he sees trees on the riverbank and fish in the water and waterfowl. And there's just all the, it's Eden.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So I love it that you said, as the water begins to flow through us again.
Yes.
As we become unclogged, right? More open channels for it. Well, it was just a fascinating thing for me to watch my clients, taking square dancing classes and things like that. And I didn't connect it until I understood more of what St. Irenaeus was talking about, that the mission of God is human restoration.
Right.
Right?
To be fully alive and in all areas. And one of the first things I think that was stolen from us in Eden, you brought up Eden a minute ago, and in paradise, they were, Adam and Eve, getting to know intimacy with God as their father, but also as their creator.
Mm.
And so we sometimes think of God in the moment as their, father, but we forget a creator of everything. One of the first things as a dad they want to do is teach their son and daughter how to co-create, how to enter into this beauty of creation that they see all around them. And, Adam, one of the first things he's invited to do is name the animals, right? A highly creative act.
Yes.
And so I just think this is such a fascinating topic because it's been stolen from most people. And I would even ask the listener or the viewer, when you started to realize this conversation was going to involve creativity and story, what was your first reaction? Because for many it's, oh, well, I'm not creative, or, oh, this isn't for me, but maybe my son would like this, or maybe my spouse.
This is an electrician podcast for electricians.
Right.
Right. Yeah. This is John's annual nutrition podcast, and I'm not really into that stuff. My kids will love this.
Right. So the temptation is to kind of tune out, save it for somebody else. But we want to just say no. Like the reality is we have the DNA of God running through us as our creator and father. And part of how he made us was to be creative. That doesn't mean you may be a painter. It doesn't mean you may be, a writer, but it does mean everything you do, decisions you make in your family, with your finances, with your career, with your health.
Mm.
All of those involve creative ways to imagine what could be, think it through, try new things.
Mm.
And so we've lost that. That's been stolen, is a better way to say it, maybe, by the enemy, I think, ever since the fall. And part of what's exciting is to help people awaken back to, wow, like I do have creativity flowing through me.
Yeah.
And how do I now use it?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's a broader understanding of rule and subdue, be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
Like, what is it that we are to be about
Right.
in our calling, in our gifting, in our life, in our joy? And it is a fascinating thing. If you just take the narrative of Genesis, God, Spirit of God's hovering over the water. God brings order out of chaos. He begins large movements. It's just like an artist, right? It's like, get the clay on the wheel, get some paint on the canvas, because it's huge, big movements. It's not detailed yet, right? It's light and dark. It's land and sea. It's separation of the waters themselves, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then he starts getting more intricate, right? And then it's the plant life,
Yes.
and then it's the animal life. It's fascinating that it grows and more intricate, just like an artist.
Yes.
He's, finishing up this and working on this. Okay. That is all you know about God. When it says, and then he put his image with him on the earth to be his partners, male and female. He made them.
Yes.
So the only thing you know about God right now is that he is wildly powerful. I mean, extraordinarily. Oh my gosh. The night sky, the stars, the aurora borealis, the oceans. Like, this is a magnificently powerful God.
Yes.
And he is wildly creative.
Yes.
Right? It's the only thing you know. Well, this was never taught to me in most church circles that we were in, is to bear the image of God is to be wildly creative and, frankly, in our own capacities, wildly powerful.
Right. Right. And there's an invitation in that even from the very beginning, first two verses of Genesis 1, so the very first two verses or sentences, we see God name himself as creator, and then he creates out of chaos. Genesis 1:2.
Yep.
The murky darkness,
Yes.
the inky blackness.
The tahu wabahu.
Yes.
Yep.
And so we see our God who comes into not the perfect studio where everything's neatly organized and calm and quiet and comfortable, but he strides into chaos and he does his best work. He creates the oceans and the stars and the wildflowers and the stallions, all out of what was chaos and emptiness and a void. And so to me, part of the joy of our creativity is we don't have to wait until everything's perfect, whether it's our age, we think we're too old, too young, we think time's passed, we think we should have had the degree, but we don't. Like, God is very comfortable in creating in chaos and saying, now we get to do the same in the world, environment, place we live. Take the chaos and through what you love to do, create beauty, life, and order in your family, at work, at church.
Summer vacation, what you're going to do with your weekends, what the family trip looks like this year, or if, single, if you're with some friends, what does creativity look like in a road trip? In other words, gang, what we're curious about this week is, why is human flourishing, if that truly is the aim of the gospel, and it is, John 10:10, I've come that you may have life. Why is human flourishing so intimately connected to the expression of the Imago Dei in creative endeavor? So we're not just talking about painting or everybody, you should learn music.
Right.
Now, it's not what this podcast is about. This podcast is wondering about human flourishing and why it expresses itself in a recovery of our creative faculties all across a whole spectrum of things. Because in Genesis, where he does say, rule and subdue, be fruitful and multiply, The Hebrew there means fierce mastery. The human beings are created, endowed, imbued, empowered by our Papa, who is creative and powerful, to exercise a fierce mastery in our domains. And that fierce mastery is not something rigid or legalistic, but it's wildly creative.
Yes.
As we exercise mastery in education, as we exercise mastery over our finances, you bet. On and on the expressions go. So as human beings are getting that back, as they're getting more of their heart and soul back, the fierce mastery begins to present itself.
Yes. And it's something that, if we look at it like is something that we have to do perfectly, then we'll shy away or it'll get shut down. It's like, you've heard this story probably, John, but a lot of teachers will say in kindergarten, if they ask any of the children if they want to sing a song, every hand goes up in the room. By 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, same question, nobody raises their hand.
Oh.
And many of them are way better singers at that point, right? Like they have a better voice at that point, but they've been conditioned to not risk, to feel shame, insecure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So talk about the shame piece, because this was intriguing. We were chatting about this before we hit the record button today.
Yeah. Well, I'm reading a fascinating book, and it's not on creativity, but it's on shame, and it's called The Soul of Shame. And we'll put that in the show notes if anybody wants to take a look at it. But he goes all the way back, Kurt Thompson goes all the way back to Genesis and Eden, and he looks at how from the beginning, shame has been the number one or a number one goal of the enemy, was to create doubt and shame that if somehow God was holding out, then it was because we weren't worth more, that he didn't trust us with more information. That was the lie. And it created a sense of shame that then he could come in and maneuver and manipulate. The enemy could to Adam and Eve. And so we see that shame as a major weapon against us in all areas of life. But I think in our gifting or creativity, the things we are good at, the things that we are leaders at, or
the things that bring us life,
bring us joy, life, those are attacked. And one of the big weapons that the enemy uses is shame. Is you're really not that good at it, or you have nothing original to say. Don't risk it. Play it safe. And the end result is whatever God had infused us with to change the world for good through that gift gets shut down.
Yes.
Yeah. And
oh gosh, the shame piece is just huge, because you see it with little ones, right? In kindergarten, they're ready to tell their story, But as they go on through grade school, the peer pressure, the fear of exposure, I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. Right. That human shame that's in all of us. Yeah. Friend of ours has this darling daughter. She's in young elementary school, and she's playful and she's funny and she's very, very creative with her dress, with her, the way she dresses. Yeah. And they were telling me about dropping her off the other day, and she had a sweater on that she really liked. She loves this sweater, but they saw her taking it off really quick in the back seat before she got out of the line at carpool. And they're like, honey, no, keep your sweater on. It's really cute. Mm-hmm. And she says, none of the other girls are wearing sweaters today.
Wow.
Okay. So there it is, right? It began the fear of exposure.
Right.
The fear of not fitting in, the fear of not being enough. If you put yourself out there, the world is not going to cheer.
Right.
Right. And so the shame begins to shut down vibrant parts of our personality.
And social media is brutal on this front, because people on social media don't tend to lift up and compliment. They tend to critique, make fun of, put down, compare. And so
Yep.
that's another layer that even as we get older, it's risky to try to offer something in a world where so many things seem to move against it. And I think what we're naming is when you awaken to what makes you come alive, the passion, the joy, the things that you're drawn to, and you're walking with God, that's an invitation to pursue it even before the world asks for it,
Yes.
applauds it.
Yeah, beautiful.
And that stay-at-home mom or
Beautiful.
dad can experience
Beautiful.
this, right?
Okay, 2 stories. So first, a confession. So Stacy would want to do something new with the house. She'd want new curtains, or honey, can we paint that bedroom, please? And my early reaction, and so this is with a less healed soul,
Okay.
my early reaction in marriage would be, why? It's fine. It's functional.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I read this line. I was a big follower of Francis Schaeffer way back in the 70s and 80s. And Edith Schaeffer, his wife, they ran that L'Abri,
Right.
those retreat
Yes.
centers in Europe, and for the recovery of the human soul. Okay. And she said, we must not only be true, we must be beautiful.
Hmm.
And I'm like, wait, what?
Hmm.
It really got my attention. And I began to realize, oh, okay. So in my shame, in my fragmentation, early days, less healed,
Yes.
I wasn't aware of what Stacy was trying to bring to our home was life and beauty and tranquility and creativity. And this was the imago Dei in her.
Yes.
She is being God-like, right? In
Right.
her, creativity.
It's good.
Now, so 40 years later, I walked into my office, my home office. This is about 18 months ago. And it was one of those moments of realization. I think we had been away for a while. You know how you go away for 2 weeks
Yes,
on vacation,
right.
and you come home and you realize, oh my gosh, our house smells. You didn't know,
Yes.
or wow, those curtains are tattered, or whatever it is. Boy, the dogs have destroyed this carpet.
Yeah.
You were out of it. Now you see it.
Yes.
Okay, I had one of those moments. Walk into my home office, and I'm like, I have not changed anything in this office for 21 years.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, I can't take it. I can't do it. It was really good. There was an awakened me. It was probably after a vacation, so my soul's better.
Yeah.
Right? So the healing of the human soul becomes aware of rule and subdue. Be fruitful and molten. Like, no. We got to improve this. We got to bring life here.
Yeah.
So I started pulling things out and changing, lamps and plants and stuff like that. Changed actually the whole direction of my office, my desk against a new wall, just to bring life into it again. And it was coming out of that
Yes.
human restoration.
That's so good.
Right?
Yeah.
So Alan, you had a career in a different field for a long time.
Right.
You were in fiction publishing for a big part of your career.
Yeah. In publishing for 20 years, and started the fiction division in my last 10 years there.
Okay.
But during that 10-year period, John, it was probably about 500 novels that I was the publisher of. So
Wow.
a lot of stories that I got to be a part of.
So what I want to know is, what did you learn? What did you observe in flourishing authors
Yes.
versus non-flourishing?
Yeah. Well, you do get to see a lot. I mean, you're in the incubator in real time, and we partnered with probably over 45 authors a year, to do different stories, all genres, young adult, sci-fi, fantasy, romance.
Amish fiction, Amish romance.
Amish fiction was a big one back then. But yeah. And so, but it didn't really matter the genre. What I saw was, and these were the top fiction writers who were Christian. It was a Christian fiction publishing division.
Yeah.
So these were top Christian creatives of that time. We were the largest Christian fiction publisher. So we were able to pay higher advances and work with the really best of the best, as well as some new writers as well. But what I observed was whether they were new or whether they were long-term, first of all, the power of story is an amazing thing to see in people, because you realize it's not just what they're writing or creating on their laptop or with a pen. It starts with their life. And that was one of the biggest revelations to me, was something I've said since then, is you can't tell a better story than the one you're living. Like, you can't imagine dialogue for a character that understands love or nobility or sacrifice or death or romance more than you do. You can't fake it in those areas. And so where you haven't lived and examined life or risk very well, your characters in your world will be deficient in those ways.
Fascinating.
So that was the first thing I started to realize over time, was I'm asking certain writers to do something they can't do because they haven't lived enough yet before they've tried to write. And so that was something that started to help me see the heart level of a writer, not just the imagination or, wow, this would be a creative idea, right? And the other thing was, the writers who went the distance were those who were actively pursuing their creativity with God. And the ones who weren't, it either was ego that would take over if fame happened, if a bestseller happened, or if it didn't, shame would take over. Or probably the worst, the most disappointing thing that would happen is when a writer found something that worked on some level, they would take that as their cue to keep recreating the same thing over and over and over. And we've all seen this with some of our favorite writers, where you're like, I loved their first book. And the second book, you're like, I love this, but it's kind of what they had in the first book. And the third and fourth start to be cookie cutter copies. And the reason is because in an industry like publishing, once you find something that brings some success or some applause, the writers would take that as a cue. And sometimes the publishing team would have, then we have to keep churning out more of the same, right?
Yes.
And so formula was an Achilles heel that seemed like the guaranteed golden key to longevity. But ultimately, writers who use that realize their audience is fading because the magic, the wonder, the true creativity gives way to predictable formula.
Safety.
Right.
Safety.
Control, safety.
Right. Yeah. So you're no longer, a heart fully alive.
Right.
You're beginning to live out of shame, fear, control.
You're wanting the applause from the first book, but the applause was for your originality.
Yes.
And then you mistake that for more of the same. And that's just not obviously for writers. That's like, you see careers that go that way, right? Where it's the one trick pony. Something happens for a man, for a woman.
Yep.
It works. Yep. And that becomes their identity that they cling to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just fascinated with this. So can I let the shame card out? I realize you and I have both used the word fascinating or fascinated about 6 times already in the podcast. So now I feel shame about that.
Fascinating.
Human flourishing is the outcome of the redemptive work of Jesus Christ in any person's life, young, old, male, female, whatever.
Yes.
The goal of God is the recreation of our lives in Christ, so that ultimately we are not living in shame. We're no longer under the lies and the accusations of the evil one. The things that have been wounded are being healed. The trauma is being cleansed from us and restored, right? And the fruit of that is joy and curiosity and exploration, which would let a novelist go, I wonder what would happen if I did this, versus fear, control, predictability. No. I need to stay here in this safe product.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Oh, it's just fascinating. Okay, I can't do that. It's just fascinating. I just said it again. What is that? I'm not going to go to shame.
Don't go to shame.
I'm going to say, find a couple of new words, John, that mean the same thing. Several years ago, a friend of mine sent me this unbelievably moving video. It was, one of the YouTube type videos that get shared around. It was a ballerina who was in her 80s, maybe 90s, and had almost completely come under Alzheimer's and dementia. And they were hardly able to get reactions from her anymore, but particularly reactions of joy or a light in her eyes, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And we're going to put this video in the show notes because it is so powerfully moving. This ballerina, what they did was they started playing music to her, and particularly music from ballets that she had been in. And the oh my goodness, you begin to watch the awakening of the human soul.
Yes.
And at first she starts to move her hands a little bit, and then she goes back to shut down. And there's a lot of shame. But they keep it up and they keep playing the music. And then finally there's this thing where she's remembering and she's living it out. And then the way they do the videos with this young ballerina doing, it's just so exquisite. I could watch that over and over and over again because it literally, it looks like redemption. It looks like the goal of the gospel is to bring people out of darkness and into light and to free us from shame so that we might become creative in all the ways and expressions that's meant to be, right?
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah. So gang, we're going to actually let you linger on this and not I want to tell some stories next week, and I want to talk about your writing and my writing and how we do it as a part 2 of this conversation.
Yes.
Okay? But before we leave, we're actually just going to take another pause. And we're going to just let you linger for a moment before you, for your Spotify or whatever platform you use, just kicks up the next newscast or podcast or something or music. Just take a moment. Let this come in. Think about your own restoration. Think about the ways in which a greater level of freedom, how would that express itself in your life right now?